Ryan Mathematical Papyrus. You can probably get it right in the bookstore. Can you get that here, bro? Here you can see the area of a triangle. They're figuring out the area of triangles here in Kemet. And look at the hieratic writing here. This is not even this. See, they have 3 different types of writing. We get into that, sister. We get into that. We move on, and then after they figured out the area of the triangles, they built triangles. Right there, and then they tell us Pythagoras was the father of the law of triangulation, which they called him, named it after him, Pythagorean theorem. And we got triangles sitting right there, the biggest triangle you ever saw. They can't see it. We move on, and here you can see the volume of pyramids, the volume of truncated pyramids. Diop in Civilization and Barbarism showed that the Mesopotamians tried to come up with a formula for the volume of a truncated pyramid. It was wrong. They always tell us how advanced the Mesopotamian mathematics was. They never show you a single example of it. Just tell you that. We move on. Here you can see, wait a minute. Let's get the focus here. Here they are, square numbers. Square numbers. Now what's the basis for Pythagoras theorem? Isn't it square roots? Isn't it square numbers? Here's the basis of it, the squaring of numbers. This is the Berlin papyrus here. The Moscow papyrus, rather. So don't say Brother Matthew is making this stuff up. That Brother Matthew can't subject his passion to reason. You can see Pythagoras coming into Kemet. We studied for 20, he said it himself. He studied for 22 years in Kemet. Then he went and studied 16 years in Mesopotamia and went back to Greece and started a school of mathematics. Then they said he was the father of the theory. Just like they said Hippocrates was the father of medicine. You saw Imhotep. They made him the god of medicine. And the only first thing you hear of Hippocrates, he's in Egypt studying medicine. So apparently, the writers of this article in archaeology, Hussein in Egypt and the Rise of Greece, who said that we were just being emotional, apparently they didn't see the Rhiine mathematical papyrus and the sculptures of Imhotep. Move on here. It's the same slide here. So take a look at this thing here. So here you got some sisters on the wall in Kemet. Cornrows. You white folks ain't walking around except for Bo Derek. She copied it for a little while. But you don't see them walking around with cornrows. This is an African hairstyle. And here you can see the sisters with their melanin in their skin. Now, when the National Geographic and the Epigraphic Society gets through with them, this is what the sisters look like. So they're saying that we're trying to latch on to somebody else's history. Am I trying to latch on to someone else's history, or are they trying to latch on to my history? It's a question. We move on. Here you can see the sisters here in Kemet. Right, this is in Kemet. In the hotel in Aswan. The sisters standing here, you can't tell them apart. And this is what happened to the sister here in National Geographic. So even the Arabs in Kemet know the sister was black. They put her in the lobby of the hotel. But we're not being objective here. They saw this. Ramesses of Tutankhamun, the various pharaohs had these headrests. They said, headrests? That can't be. Oh, it was just a symbolic thing there. They just dismissed it. Then you go right to the interior of Africa and you see the brother laying up here with the headrest. Then you go back to the headrest here and you see, well, this brother took this brother 2 years to grow this hairstyle. He wasn't going to get his hairstyle up. So he made that headrest. So Diop showed the cultural unity of black Africa. You can get that book here, I know. The cultural unity of black Africa. But Ramesses is staring face to face with the ancestral land. So was Cleopatra black? Now, Cleopatra is a fairly insignificant queen in my opinion, and it's really a queen that I'm not really interested in claiming for her blackness. Sleeping around with those varmints like she was. But maybe there was some strategy behind it, I don't know. But since they want to raise the question about whether or not she was black, she was perceived as being black until the last 200 years when the Aryan model of history came on the scene. Even in medieval Europe, Shakespeare and all the rest of the writers, Volpone, Ben Jonson, they considered this woman to be black. She was considered to be black because the tradition of the ancient Egyptians was black, even in medieval Europe. So you go right to medieval Europe, you see Cleopatra here shown as being black. So apparently when he wrote this article, he didn't do the research that I was doing. He's from Harvard, Yale, Princeton. I'm from South Central. I can find stuff that he can't find. Then he couldn't find Shakespeare, what Shakespeare wrote in his Antony and Cleopatra. I am with Phoebus, amorous, Pinchas, black. I am darkened by the sun's touches. Then he writes Cleopatra's description of herself. This, of course, not to be taken too literally. Since he raised the question, I wasn't really going after it because there's so many other great queens like Amosi Nefertari, and Nefertari, the queen of Ramesses II, and Queen Hatshepsut, and Queen T. Oh, we can go on down the line. There's plenty of queens for us to claim to be African. Besides the last one, Cleopatra the seventh, out of 7 of them. We move on. So here you can see the sister here, dark, Phoebus, amorous, Pinchas, black, skin touched by the sun's rays. But National Geographic can't see it that way. This is what happened to the sister. National Geographic. So these are the authorities, the so-called authorities on our history. They're the ones that the curators in New York, and the Cairo Museum, and the Metropolitan Museum of this, and the Metropolitan Museum of that, who teach all of this misinformation to our children and to ourselves. We move on, we can see here, then Bernal comes out with the book, Afro-Asiatic Roots of Classical Civilization, and all hell breaks loose. But here we've been studying this stuff for years, long before we even knew who this guy was. They just ignore black scholars, ignore black architects, ignore anything that has to do with black people, until white folks start talking about it. Then all of a sudden it becomes a valuable topic for discussion. Went to UC Riverside, they had a whole 2 panels, white folks on 2 panels, debating about Bernal. One group represented the Aryan model of history, the other group represented the ancient model that said the Egyptians were black. All of them were white. It was an Asian girl that got me down there who saw one of my lectures at Brentwood High School. It was before all white people. There was 800 white people there. And they went back and forth, arguing back and forth about whether or not the Egyptians were black. Then after that, I did a lecture, and everybody shut up. They were coming over to me, apologizing. And the Asians ran over. There was a bunch of Asians in there. It was right after the uprising, and to shut them down. You know, they came over and they said, "Brother, I've never seen anything like this." They were just all excited. That would bowl me over. Asians had never seen anything like this before. So this is the Aryan model of history. Howard Carter, James Henry Breasted, all these cats got together and decided that they're going to write the black man out of history. The last 200 years we have been written out of the history books. These are the ones who have written the books, who have written the foundation of the racist material that is throughout the educational system here, throughout the United States and Europe, all over, including in Africa, use the same textbooks from these people who are supposed to be scholars. So here I am from South Central. I want you to see the information. We're just getting warm here. I want you to see this here. Okay, here's George Rawlinson on his book on Egypt, History of Egypt. He writes about Amosi Nefertari. Her name, they call her, sometimes she's called Amasis, but Amosi is more appropriate, so I'll be calling her Amosi Nefertari. Nefertari Amosi, or the beautiful, companion of Amosi, King Amosi, okay, and who is represented on the monuments with pleasing features, but a complexion of ebon blackness. It is certainly wrong to call her a negress. She was an Ethiopian of the best physical type. And her marriage with Amosis may have been based upon a political motive. He even gives it up. Egyptian pharaohs from time to time allied themselves with the monarchs of the south, partly to obtain the aid of Ethiopian troops in their war, partly with a view of claiming in right of their wives dominion over the upper Nile. So he's saying that he's admitting that the Egyptians married black women, Ethiopians. And they weren't black themselves. They reached back and got women from the south to marry these women. He says they were Ethiopian, but they weren't negresses. Okay. So what we're talking about here is some black-white people, is what we're talking about. But I'm being emotional, and I want to latch on to somebody else's history. This is what he's teaching us. So he goes on, his madness continues on. But he goes on to talk about her. Mostly commemorated upon his monument during her son's reign. She held for a time, at any rate, the reign of power, while in after ages she was venerated as ancestress and founder of the 18th dynasty. In other words, she was seen as the ancestress, the founder of the entire 18th dynasty. Now, for those of you who don't know it, the 18th dynasty was the most brilliant period in Kemetic history. They built the most monumental structures in terms of temples and architecture that's ever been known in the world. Today, to this day, the great temple of Amun at Apet Asut, or Waret, which we call Karnak today, that's still today the largest temple in the world, built in the 18th dynasty, the most important aspects of it. So she was the ancestress of that entire dynasty. In his own words, the successor of Amosi was his son by this Ethiopian princess, Amenhotep. So Amenhotep was the son of this queen, the founder of the 18th dynasty. This is why she couldn't be a negress. So we move on. He goes on. This cat is something else. This is George Rawlinson. The Egyptians appeared to have been among the darkest races with which the Greeks of the early times came into direct contact. Herodotus calls them blacks. But this is an extreme exaggeration akin to that by which all the native inhabitants of Hindustan have been termed niggers. Yeah, see? Have been termed niggers. The monuments show that the real complexion of the ordinary Egyptian man was brown with a tinge of red, a hue not very different from that of the Copts. This is psychopathic racism, madness. Here's a man that's sitting here looking at black people. Look at yourself, brown, black, all different colors. It says that because he said we exaggerated when we call them black, because that's like calling everybody niggers or something, is what he's saying. But this is a scholar. This is an Egyptologist, a man who is renowned and respected in his craft as an Egyptologist. This is no lightweight. These are the guys that do the digging and do the writing, in which the historian comes over with a general view, takes his information, and then writes it into the history books. A Copt is another black person living in Egypt. That's basically it's a religion, the Coptic religion, and basically people call Copts as a result of that. But it's nothing no more an extension and a reorganization of some earlier principles, really in Christianity, in the form of Christianity. What the basic called the Copt up until recently has been black and brown. And so he says they were. I'll show you that in a minute when we see Al-Jahiz, who back in Persia during the conquest of the Arabs, he clearly showed the Copts were also black. We move on. We can see here. In fact, here's Al-Jahiz right here. Now, see, this is something because you see, this is before the Aryan model. We're talking about around the 7th century, between the 7th century and the 12th century. You find that they uniformly saw the Egyptians even then as being black. And so this man here wrote a book called the Story of the Blacks Over the Whites, which at this time the whites were bragging and the Arabs were bragging about themselves. And so this man Al-Jahiz, who became the father of Islamic literature, look it up in the Encyclopedia Britannica. Jahiz wrote this book, The Glory of the Blacks Over the Whites. In this particular book, he was defending his own self right in Persia, in the midst of all these people who were bragging. This is how much nerve this brother had. And this became the definitive work on the subject. He says the number of blacks is greater than the number of whites because most of those who are counted as whites are comprised of the people of Persia, the mountains, Khorasan, Rome, Slavia, France, and Iberia. And anything apart from them is insignificant. He goes on to say, but among the blacks are the Copts. That's Jahiz. He's black in Persia right now. Are the Copts, the Nubians, the Zakawa, the Moors, the people of the Zend, the Hindus, the Kama, the Dabila, and the Chinese, and those beyond.